Although the portfolio manager on how to use it is quite well described in the manual, or the little getting started manual rather, this video is for those clients that would rather watch a video than read through a manual. In order to create a portfolio, first thing we obviously have to do is to go to Portfolio, Portfolio Manager, and incidentally you see here two things. You see Portfolio Manager and Simulation. Whatever I show you in the Portfolio Manager in fact also applies to the simulation portfolio. We'll click on Portfolio. That is opening the Portfolio Manager. Here you can see it, the cursor is now changed, and the first thing, because I haven't got a portfolio, it asked me to open a new one. So I click on the new button and it asks me now for a name, and the reason why it does that is that you can add as many portfolios as you like. So you can have different portfolios for different kind of investments. Like for instance, you could have a portfolio for short-term trading, one for long-term trading, or you could have a portfolio for your family in case they also trade the stock market. So there's many different ways that you can have a different portfolio. Let's call this one, for the purpose of this exercise, we'll call it test, and we say OK. Alright, now the first thing we see at the top here is open position. Then we see purchase value, and everything, all the values here are at zeros. Now in order to do a transaction, you will have to firstly have money in your broking account. So let's put a cash balance in. Now that would, in a normal circumstances, this would be the amount of money that you would invest with your stockbroker. So we go to new transaction, and now we want to actually deposit money. So we click on deposit. We may as well keep today's date. And you will see that all the other functions here are grayed out. And let's say that I want to put in a total amount of, let's say, 10,000 Rand, which is about the minimum that most stockbrokers will accept, or at least the brokers dealing with private clients. And I'll click Save. So now immediately what you see is in the cash balance we now got 10,000 Rand recorded. Again here, open position. This will show you the position of shares in your portfolio. In other words, it does not include shares that you have sold. The current value I will discuss in a moment, and the percentage difference I'll come back to as well. Alright, now we want to stay in transactions, because now that I've got my first transaction of 10,000 Rand, I now want to put some transactions in here. So the next one is, I would say, put a new transaction. However, you can also, of course, if you made a mistake, you can delete the transaction, or you can edit it. Let's, for the purpose of this exercise, edit the last transaction by putting slightly more money in. And let's say that the deposit is still standing there, the date is still there, but I want to increase the capital that I've loaded with my stockbroker, let's say to 20,000 Rand. And I save this, and immediately see this figure changes to 20,000, the one at the top here, and the cash balance, and everything else is what I explained to you just now. So now we need to make a new transaction. We're going to add some shares to it. So I put transaction, and again I say new transaction. Now I'm going to purchase shares. It says already buy. Now here you can, if you want to have shares in your portfolio, you want to sell, you click on there. So we are buying, so to make sure that the dot is next to the letter or the word buy. I would now select the share. In other words, the share that I want to add to my portfolio. And let's say I click on there, and immediately you get your select a share window. And now again, like in everything else in this program, you can start typing a name, and let's say I'll put in Pick n Pay, and there immediately is already, by typing the letters PI, you see Pick n Pay. So I'm going to add Pick n Pay. Let's say that I'll take it at today's date. The number of shares, let's say I want to put in 200 shares, and already it's got the price of the share as it was at the close of last night. This may not be the price that you buy the share at, but let's say that you're actually buying the share not at 39.23, but let's say you buy it at 39.50. So now you can change the figures to 39.50. Broker's cost, although we have not got a broker's note at this moment in time, but you can add your broker's cost to this at any time you wish. And let's say, I'll say the broker's cost in this case is 175 Rand. And then I say save. So now immediately, the moment you said save, you have Pick n Pay, a quantity of 200, your purchase price, which is 200, times your purchase price, which was 39.50, remember. The total cost, that is including your transaction fees or your broker's fee. The latest price, remember that was the price that it showed, it was 39.23. The latest value, which is that, the total quantity, times this gives you that value, and it shows me now that I have a loss on this portfolio of 229 Rand. Well, that is quite normal, because at this point in time you have added brokerage cost to it, and then immediately, of course, it increases the cost of the share itself. The next gives you a profit and loss percentage, so that is the 229 loss on your purchase total cost, which is down here, and that gives you 2.8% loss. It will also show you since inception, in other words, since the day that you bought this share, that recorded high. Now, it will only go forward, so as the market moves day by day after the date when we purchase these shares, it will continue to record how high the share has gone. That is quite a useful information, because you can see whether your latest value, or your latest price rather, compares favorably to the recorded high. Percent of total, that gives you, because you only have one share invested at this moment, it gives you 100%, and out of the money is 10, and we will refer to that in a moment as well, which is stop loss. Now let's say we want to add another transaction to this. Oh, incidentally, before I do that, I just want to show you at the top here what the various figures actually show. Firstly, open position 8075. That in fact is this 8075 down here. In other words, is the total value of shares invested at the moment. The total value 7846 is this latest value figure down here. The percentage difference is the minus 2.8%, which is down here, and your open value including cash, it was originally 20,000, remember, and now because we have the 20,000 and we deduct the purchase price of 8,000, then we have a balance here of 19,771 available, and it gives us a percentage difference from that figure to this figure of minus 1.1%. It also shows you your cash balance, which is 11,925. So in other words, you still got 11,925 Rand available for future investments. Now let's say we're going to add another share to this. We make another transaction, and we've now got two entries here. You've got a buying entry and a deposit, which have been explained a moment ago. Now we're going to add another share to this. So we say new transaction, and again we make it a buy, and then by keeping the tick in there, again you select the share, and let's say that we select, let's say we again start typing the name, and let's say this time we want to put in Mr. Price, and there it's already, you found Mr. Price. You can see on this line we add Mr. Price to it. Again we'll take this particular date, and let's say we bought 200 shares here as well. That immediately gives you the price of the share. And again, as I showed you earlier, you can change this price, because it's not always will you get a share bought at the price that the market closed the previous day. Let's say broker's cost. We add some broker's cost to this, and we click on that, and we'll say 185 in this case, for instance, and we click on the save button. Now the moment you do that, it adds in your holdings Mr. Price, the quantity 200, the purchase price, the total cost, the latest price, the latest value, in other words the value that is being reported at in this particular case. These are your brokerage costs, because it's 185. Remember, we put that in so that shows as an immediate loss. 2.5% loss. The recorded high, again, there is no movement since that day, so you can't put recorded high, but as the market moves you will see how this figure gets higher and higher. Percent of total. Now these figures have changed, because now you can see that out of your total cash investment, or that you have at the moment, 52% of your shares are invested in Pick n Pay, and 47.6% is invested in Mr. Price. Now this is quite important information, because you do not want to have all your eggs in one basket. In other words, you should try and invest your shares in different sectors, and both these shares do fall in different sectors, and therefore we can show you later on how you can actually see this. Out of the money 10%, that is a figure for the stop loss. Now at the top here, it now shows that your open position, in other words your total share investments, now stand at 15,382, which is the total of these two investments. Your current value is the latest value, the total of those two. Your percent difference is calculated from here to there, so that's 2.6%. In other words, you've got a 2.6% loss at this stage, which is primarily due, in fact, to broker's cost. Your open position, including cash, is what is your cash balance, which is now 4,620, plus the 14, that gives you 19,586, and it gives you a 2% loss on your total cash investment. Again, to try and delete a holding, you click on here, but we're not going to do this time. Or you can edit or change your stop loss. Now let's just show this. We have set a default of a 10% stop loss on all shares, and this figure can actually be changed. You can change this for each share at either 10%, 15%, 5%, whatever you wish, and that will come through later on when I'll show you another graph, or a holding report rather, where you will actually see your stop loss holdings. So that's the point where you would change this. Now holding information, another important report. Click on there, and now because we have Pick n Pay highlighted, it shows you immediately a graph of Pick n Pay and the way Pick n Pay has moved. It will also on the right of Pick n Pay show you a graph of the sector and how the sector has moved, so you can immediately check if Pick n Pay or whatever share you have there meets with the movement of the whole sector. It also shows you in terms of the JSE overall, and you can see that all three graphs are actually moving up. If on the other hand, for instance, the JSE the JSE4 index, which is the sector which Pick n Pay falls in, was turning down, that would be a sign that you have to be careful, because normally the sector movement is what dictates the movement of a share. Below here you have details for each day. As you can see, if I move this mouse, it will change all the figures below and the dates below. It shows you the open, the high, the low, the close, the volume, the number of deals, the DY, for lots of information. And on the right hand side, which is very useful information incidentally, it shows you the details of this company. It shows you the conclusion. This portion here, the conclusion incidentally, is a very important section that I would urge you to read, as it gives you a view of what our analyst, whose task is no other than to write comments on every share, and it'll give you some very quick view on how he sees each individual share. To close this button, we click on close. Now, there are also lots of other reports that you can run. We can click on reports. Now we can get a holding pie chart. Now that immediately shows you the different sectors that you have been invested in, that you are invested in. You are invested in Mr. Price and Pick n Pay, which are he can show you 47.57%, 52%, but also it shows you Mr. Price, which is general retail, has got 47%, and food drug 52%. So in other words, what it does show you is that your money is fairly evenly divided over two different sectors. That normally is quite an important factor, because if you had all your money in one sector and something went wrong with that sector, you could lose out badly. And therefore you can also print this, of course, which I won't do in this instance. Now you click OK. Now I right click on any field in the bottom here. And now because Pick n Pay is highlighted, now you may want to see what the graph looks like. So all you need to do is, let me do this again. I right click, this is highlighted, and I click on chart. That immediately opens up a chart of Pick n Pay, and you can now see how the share itself has performed in terms of your portfolio. Now obviously this becomes more valuable as time progresses from the date you bought it, but it gives you a very quick overview in terms of how your share has been performed. To close it, we go back, we close it off, and we go back to the portfolio manager. Right click, holdings, you can either edit it, you can delete them. Holding information, I showed you just now, remember that was this little screen here. Bring this up again. Holdings report, that gives you a different view. It gives you both shares, or whatever shares you have. It shows you the quantity, purchase price, in other words everything that you saw just now, the latest value, and so forth, as well as your profit loss and your stop loss value. In other words, what it says, if Mr. Price's price drops 23204 or below, you should really sell the share, because then your share has then dropped by 10%, which is the stop loss that we set originally. Similarly for Pick n Pay, it tells you everything here is exactly the same, latest value, profit loss, and a stop loss price of 3530. Now that information is important, but you the nice part of this program is that it will warn you whenever a share meets the stop loss figure. Again, let's right click again. You want to get a stop loss report. Now, there it tells you stop loss report for all portfolios. The portfolio name is test, but you could have several different portfolios here. The share names you have in here, the latest price, the stop loss price, and it tells you whether to hold or sell the share. If your share price drops to the stop loss figure, that here will tell you sell. But as long as it doesn't, it will tell you to keep holding the share. It also becomes important to watch this recorded high since purchase, because this allows you to check how your share price is actually performing against the movement of the share. Obviously, we haven't got any history yet because it says since purchase, and therefore we cannot show any more on different prices. But what is important is to watch this periodically to see actually how your share is performing against the highest performance of that particular company. To get out of here, again you close it and right click again. You can have a consolidated portfolio report, which in this case I can't show you because I only have one portfolio. But if you have many different portfolios, you can get a report that shows all portfolios at the same time. Transaction report that shows you exactly what you have done. This incidentally will be quite useful if ever you want to or have to put a report up to SARS for your tax performance. You can see at least when you bought the share, which is shown down here, when you bought or sold. Now let's say we're now going to, let me get rid of this screen, and I now want to do another transaction. And let's say that I want to click new transaction, and then I want to sell some shares. Let's say I want to sell some of Pick n Pay shares. So I will select Pick n Pay, again typing it in. It will find the name very quickly. You can double click on it. So the name is there. I want to sell on this date. Let's say I want to sell 100 shares, and now I've got to sell them at this price because that is the latest price I've got for the moment, and the broker's cost on this one, let's say, is about 130 Rand, and I'll save it. Immediately what you see here is that your Pick n Pay quantity is come down to 100 rather. It shows you your original purchase price, your cost, your latest price, which is the price which Pick n Pay was yesterday, latest value, how much you have lost, that's basically your loss on your broker's fee, the total percentage, and now of course the percentage of total is changed as well, but what has happened on the top is your cash balance has now increased by the value of the sale, and of course these figures have been changed as well. If you now show a holding pie chart, you will see immediately that Pick n Pay is now a lower percentage than Mr. Price, and the food and drug sector is also lower than the general retail sector. Let's see if there are any other reports that I need to talk to you about. I don't think at this point in time there's anything else, but just bear in mind, right clicking on the share name, let's say we want to see Mr. Price, I want to right click chart or lift, and there is Mr. Price immediately looking in front of me, and I can see how the performance of this share has performed. Let me show you a few other features of the Portfolio Manager. let's say we go back to a transaction, and let's say I'll put in here a new transaction. Now we've got a whole selection here of different things that you can be doing in the stock market. We've described buy, we described sell, and we described deposit. Let's say that you want to take out some money out of the stock market, out from your broker. Now at the moment we got a cash balance of 8,400, so we can actually click on withdrawal, make it today's date again, and now it's a total debit to your account. And let's say we want to withdraw 4,000 Rand. You save it, and immediately your figures change. You've now got a cash balance of 4,000, and all these figures down here change as well. Your portfolio, however, your shareholding obviously doesn't change. It only affects cash. Let me go back again, and I now do a new transaction. Incidentally, here you can also see a withdrawal of the 4,000 Rand and your original deposit of 20,000 Rand. Dividend. You can, if you wish, also keep a record of whatever dividends the share may be paying out. All you need to do is again click on this one, select the share, which could be a share obviously that is in your portfolio already, and then if you click on dividend, let me just do this now, all these fields gray out. Obviously you need to select the share, and then you must mention what your total value of your dividend was. The next one here is interest. This would mostly apply to in a case where you earn interest, and exactly the same as dividend. Take on or take off is also an interesting one. Let's say that you have an existing portfolio that you have never before recorded. Now what you can do, use take on, select the share, make it today's date. You can put in the price of the share, or the number of shares firstly, of course, that you want to put in your portfolio, the price of your share as it was when you first paid for the share. But all these fields are blanked out now because you're actually putting a transaction in your portfolio which is an old one. In other words, it happened a while ago. Again, by doing that, by take on and take off, which is the opposite of take on, your values on the top here in terms of cash balances will not change. Your only value that will change is your open position, and open position including cash. Take off is the opposite. Sundry really allows you to do anything you like, whether it's debit or a credit, and that's some option that you would very seldom use. Let's now say cancel. And as I mentioned before, any of these transactions I've shown you also apply to the simulation portfolio. Clicking back on holdings, it now only shows me the price and the two shares that I have in my portfolio. I can change the edit or the stop losses. I can delete the holdings, and I can have the holdings information. Like at the moment I'm Mr. Price, and there immediately I've got all the information I possibly could need on watching the price of Mr. Price, incidentally. Yeah. There you got all your other information, again a little bit lower down, and I would urge you to read all these. Read the conclusion. There's a lot more information in here that you can possibly discard, because it gets a little bit high and it gets a lot of fundamental information. But in the conclusion is all the data that you need to make a decision on whether this share is something that you would like to keep in your portfolio, or is something that you think the portfolio or the share should be taken out of your portfolio. This in a nutshell is all I need to tell you about the portfolio manager, and I suggest you use it, because it gives you a very good feel on how your investments are performing in the market.